What's the first thing? We got public comment, but there is
Yeah, welcome and public comment.
welcome. Any public comment, there's no public here, so. Um, yeah,
Additions or deletions to the agenda?
does anyone want to change anything? Now we're on to
And
the
minutes
actual
update.
agenda. Oh, minutes update. Um, Carrie, you talked to.
You want me to tackle that?
Yeah, go for it. I think you.
Right now, we do not have draft minutes for anybody to go over with. We have that these are live, these are recorded. People can see it if they really want to see what's going on. I don't think we've made any major decisions that we're holding anybody in the public up from providing those. We will try to tackle them and get them. I'm gonna take what I'll probably do, if it's okay with you, Adam, is take all the prior agendas and just put a little blurb with each agenda item. And then
Yeah.
look back through my notes to see if there was any other stuff that we got into. And update it, but keep them very simple.
I think that's great. I mean, the only real action items we've had so far are, not action items, but votes we've had are to repeatedly elect and re-elect officers, right? So.
Yep.
Matt's not attending tonight. He's on vacation.
Good for him.
Yeah, I agree. Not as good for us, but good for him.
Past and future building maintenance history.
Oh yeah.
Everybody was good with that, with the meeting minutes, that we'll try to get them caught up and some basic stuff going on and that kind of thing. The other thing is I had asked Duncan to prepare some kind of informational piece for us, and he went back to January 2022 all the way up until today about just like maintenance things that he has on the calendar, like in the first month of the year. These are the things that he checks. Each month is identified there when he's checking things for us to get a feel for regular routine maintenance. The next piece to this will be, and I'll work with him on it, is to complete a value of the cost associated with those maintenance items, so that there's a budgeted line item with the select board, with the town center, for $15,000 of building maintenance a year that hasn't been spent in the last 5 years, hasn't fully been spent because of wait, we're gonna do something, which is totally understandable, but
We're not doing that
we're not
quickly right now.
we're not even. I really want, in the next, that I'll work with him on this list for what really needs to be done. And I think that was the second list that he was going to prepare for me for our next meeting. Is here are some definite needs that we have. Like, if you can see, the post office in June had 2 toilets replaced. That's good. That's maintenance. That's what the money's there for. We've got filters being changed in the air filter system. We've got elevator inspections happening. The playground inspection really shouldn't be under this. It should go under the parks and that group of folks. So if there's any costs associated with that, it shouldn't pass through the town center account. But lights and replacing fluorescent lights, and maybe that's just on so that they actually remember to do it. This is his list, his working list. So that's all
Sure.
good. We could even have him filter this list for only town center and post office, and we can take an Excel of it and then just remove the other pieces to the puzzle.
Should the library be included?
I'd filter them by library and town center though,
Okay.
so that they were grouped together for what they were.
So we have visibility for both, but they're not.
Yeah.
Two separate.
Visibility for both. And then look at what happened last year and the year before, the last 2 years, to make sure we're not missing something on the list. But it doesn't seem like there's really that much on this list to total the $15,000, unless these numbers are like extremely high to have somebody come inspect the elevator. If it's $5,000, then that's a problem for us to have to budget for. The reason I asked for this is my approach might be different than you all's, and I'm totally comfortable with anybody saying they disagree or want to do something different. I would like to find some immediate needs and make some immediate recommendations to have some work done to this building. Like we talked about, the pointing of, is it called pointing of the bricks now? What's
Yeah.
it called when you?
Yeah, repointing the brick.
Repointing the brick at the entrance that's the main entrance coming into this building. We know we're keeping the building. That's a basic maintenance thing that should be scheduled and done.
Yep.
Um,
And that'll need to be done whether we rehab it or not. So
I think there's money.
Yeah. Perfect.
listed in the quotes to do some of that kind of work. So if we do it ahead of time, that's.
Correct.
No,
It's
no.
just something on. So what I'd like to do is say, possibly even come up with, for us right now, if there are immediate needs that we are aware of, that we would like to, and I'd be willing to make a motion if we create the list, and say, let's ask the select board to have the following maintenance items repaired now. This summer, or when you can, you might not get onto somebody's schedule till the fall, but you don't want to be doing that in the middle of the winter either. And those kinds of things.
If the money is, if they've already appropriated a certain amount of money to
They
do
have-
all of this, does the select board have to make that decision?
I would just prepare the list because it's coming
It's
from
not that
us.
much, but-
I think it's just coming from
Yeah.
us, even though Josh can authorize the issue, up
Yeah.
to a certain dollar figure, a spending of something. I still think it would be good to have it go as the select board agenda item. Here's the following things we would like immediate
Yeah.
maintenance work done. This came from our committee.
Yeah.
So we're working.
Yeah,
I
and
don't
we
think
came
there
to an
would be any
agreement.
huge. I don't think
Debate.
Anyone would have any,
No.
yeah.
Problem
I mean,
with that,
it's-
yeah.
And it
Part of-
might
I would be,
we have to speak to Josh to say, cause I think it's Josh that gets the estimates. I don't think we would go out and get the estimates on this, or if he comes back to us and says that we have to get the estimates, at least we know how it's going to work.
sure.
Cause I'm not familiar with
I'm
how
not-
it's gonna work. I know the Three Parks Committee, they made them go get the estimates because we're talking of $450,000 or $550,000 spending.
Yeah.
We're talking just doing maintenance of 15,000,
Yeah.
big difference.
I think I think this is a great idea. I think my off the cuff guess is that if we start getting into the masonry stuff, we'll far exceed that 15,000 pretty quick. Doesn't mean we shouldn't do it and that might change the process a little bit. I still think it's worthwhile to pursue.
I think they also have unallocated funds
Yeah.
that they're
I
gonna.
think we
put
have
in.
a pretty good reserve, right? Is that,
We're not even talking about using town center reserve. We can.
oh, just the annual budgeted amount for.
Yeah, let's look at the
discussion. Okay.
15,000 and see
Yeah.
what we can do to get some basic things done with that. And if we find that pointing and maybe we start on just a certain section of the building.
Side or whatever.
You know, like the entrance areas or where's the worst and have somebody come. We don't need to spend $30,000 if we can have some work done now.
Yeah.
And get somebody's
Yeah.
opinion, get an expert's
agree.
opinion on a mason's opinion, not an engineer's.
Yes.
Some of the most recent work that was done sort of with that kind of small piece by piece was all the work on the portico out front and the drainage and the roof repair and it's supposed to drain better. I'm not sure it actually does, but they did some pieces like that and we talked about that. And Josh, I think this was just before I got on the committee last time. So I don't know if the committee found the estimates or if Josh got the estimates. But that was like the work that was being.
Did that get done? Because I know, I had originally heard that the problem was that a plastic pipe was used inside
And-
that froze. the
Yeah.
Wrong kind of
There
material when it
was a
was.
weird design, apparently. It did. My understanding is that it was addressed,
So
but I'm not sure that it was totally solved the problem.
I had heard it had to
And
be
that was
rebuilt.
partly a
Yeah, there's-
design.
So I built
Flaw in the
that thing
portico.
like a long time ago, the gutters.
Yeah.
I didn't design it,
Yeah.
so don't pin that on me. I mean, it was a bad idea at the time. It's a very cool design. But the gutters are recessed into the roof and the
Yeah.
pipe goes down in the column. And so it works great until something freezes and then
Yeah.
it obviously ruptures. And I think there was supposed to be heat trace in it that was supposed to be
Yeah.
inspected annually and it just didn't.
Yeah.
And so it froze. I imagine that's probably what happened again,
Yeah.
right?
But it's an example of how we used funds
Yep,
for sort of
to
small
repair.
projects.
Yep.
To repair things along the way.
Is that still on the list is the
I
question?
don't think so. I think they thought, that would be a good question for like Jeff Forward. Did the portico work sort of get completed in terms of,
Is it him or is it Josh? Shouldn't Josh know?
Josh would probably know too, but
Yeah, I guess.
I think my understanding is it was completed because we stopped talking about it. So
Yeah,
I was like,
I-
"Are we moving on?"
Well, maybe if it was
Yeah.
part of the whole big job,
Yeah.
then you still have.
No, there wasn't gonna be any work to the exterior of the building other than like windows and fire escape when we were doing the original bond vote, it was all interior work. It wasn't,
Okay.
there was no
So that wasn't
exterior
included.
masonry or anything included in that
Oh,
proposal,
that's interesting.
And that's even.
other than the post office roof.
Even more reason to.
Yeah.
Do the masonry now and things like that.
Mhm.
So. I guess the other thing I would say on this is I think this is me just talking as a committee member, obviously not the select board, but I know we have a good portion of ARPA money that is no longer committed or allocated based on the sidewalk. What's the reprioritization? Try to spin that. I think it would make sense, and it could be a pretty strong case for us to propose some smaller capital improvements to this building that are of the magnitude that would work with the ARPA money. I think that would be a very welcome thing from the select board. I know that spending money that
Be allocated.
I
Is
think
it a
they,
certain
well,
amount?
we've reshuffled it, put it in a reserve and
Oh.
used it to offset lost revenue, I guess. So we have, I think it's indefinitely now.
Yeah, but there's no reason if we don't propose something that they can't get it going
Yeah.
on before 12/31.
Perfect. Yeah, and I think that even more so, I think that if it sits there unallocated for a while, you know, I don't know. I try to be pretty frugal with my finances.
Unfortunately, if it's just sitting there, it would tend to disappear after a while.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah,
It gets
somebody
chipped
else is
away.
gonna come asking for it,
And
so.
exactly, and someone, and it could be a totally worthy cause, but you know, we've already established, I think everyone that, even people that voted against this building said stuff needs to be done to it, everyone acknowledged that,
Can
so
we
that's a good chunk of money
take
we
this
can leave.
time right now to draft a basic list that we know, we all agree needs to be done? Can I put pointing
Yeah, I think that's a
the building.
very basic.
the brick? Is it called the
Yeah,
brick?
I think, I don't, sorry, I'm not a mason,
The brick exterior.
fortunately.
So that's one. I personally, I don't know if all the doors are working correctly. I'd question that, and if they are not, that's kind of security related to me.
Yeah,
So I'd want to make sure the doors are functioning. And do any of them,
And I think that locks and security measures for the building are in place because I don't know how many people actually have keys to this building. So, and if the locks are always working, so.
so I'll put locks and keys on that
Yep.
same list. To have that inventoried or looked at, or when was the last time they were, was it rekeyed, all that kind of
Yep.
stuff.
I would advocate for some kind of waterproofing in the basement, especially in the radiate space, because they're getting water seepage through the floors and walls into their space that they're concerned about. And I mean, if we're going to continue to use the basement space for tenant space, we should make sure that it is more waterproof than it is.
I know that part of, I've been looking at the flood mitigation process, you know, it's hard to figure it out. The basic things are obvious, but there's a lot of details that you just get little hints in the funding notes and stuff of what they're planning to do that I don't understand a lot of it, but one part of it is to apply liquid waterproofing on the outside of the foundation, and then it references some excavating document that I haven't been able to find. I don't know, are they
I think
gonna,
that's
would
a
they
major
plan?
project.
Yeah, I think if we're not doing major renovation and.
And I'm
it's
not
like
sure
the
if we're not,
flood,
though.
Well, so it would be
the-
something either flood proofing, wet
Okay.
proofing, or if we decide that we're not doing that, we should do something to do a sealant or something on the basement, like, the northern basement systems people advertise, because
yeah.
if we're not gonna renovate the interior of that space and flood proof it in a really thorough way, we should.
I think that's gonna be a major, I mean, first of all, any excavation outside the building, I
Mhm.
think we're gonna get into a major project with that and
Yeah.
would have to have a
Yeah.
lot more details than just having a mason come in and point.
Mhm.
Right.
Or just
Yeah.
fixing some doors that aren't
I-
locking properly. I don't disagree with that being on the list, but I think that's gonna take
And-
us.
Yeah, and if we do go through with a larger project, which it seems we really need to at some point. The plan is we have to move them out of the basement.
Right,
And so spending a lot of money to make it. I mean, if we can
When we're
do
gonna
something
flood-proof it with the
small to make it
fence.
more livable for the however many years it's gonna be before we get there. That's one thing, but spending an awful lot of money to do things that we wouldn't do,
I'm hesitant on that one too. I am too. I wouldn't mind talking more about it.
I am intrigued. I think we should pursue it not because I think that it's a realistic project to do within the budget we have now, but I am curious what that breaks out to super rough, roughly, like for a financial commitment and for how intrusive it would be to do just that part. Because I do think we'll bump into a spot where we're kind of like, we don't want to do the entire post office tear down.
Mhm.
But what parts of the flood mitigation can we do without doing that? Because I think there's a lot of those assumptions. So while I don't think that we're going to do it with the ARPA money and some reserves funds, I do think it's worth pursuing because we might get into a spot where it's a chunk that needs to be done.
I would like that to be our first major project we're looking at, flood
Flood
Yeah, I
mitigation.
agree.
Yeah.
And waterproofing the basement. So I think that's the number one thing for us to
I guess-
look at as a larger scale project than that $15,000 or a little bit more than that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I thought, are we adding things to the list that are bigger or are we trying to
I'll do both. I'll do two different
Okay.
lists.
Okay.
One is the basic maintenance and the other would be a larger scale, larger project for us to look at. And all of us really understand what we're looking at with it
Yeah.
versus the big plans and all the different
Yep.
things that they were doing there.
One of the things that while we're looking at bigger things that repeatedly, I've done a bunch of these projects in smaller buildings that repeatedly seems obvious to me to break out where we have a big chunk of money is tackling the windows, whether that's two windows, a side of windows, two sides of the building of windows or whatever. But I mean, obviously it's intrusive to the interior in that there's no window and there's some carpentry to do while you're doing it, but it's not intrusive in the way that redoing sprinkler and all that stuff is. It
How
seems
to
like something
address
we
the
could do.
windows, yep.
And I mean, I don't think they're failed right now. They're working fine, but that's gonna be one of the things that's critical to any rehab, right? If we do new windows, that'll change. It's gonna make the building more comfortable and it's gonna protect it long term. So I don't think we're gonna do that easily, but
Yeah, I don't know what, there was talk in some of our earlier meetings that there was a quote of something like $1 million to change all the windows. But that wasn't the number that I think I found in the documentation we got here. It was more like 300,000 or 400,000, something like that. And I believe that includes changing all the basement windows too, which I still haven't seen. good
I saw the
reason.
same thing, and that's what makes me really intrigued and kind of want to price it out separately is because
Yeah.
that's in the ballpark of what we could pull off on the high end with ARPA money and reserve fund, and that would put a big dent in solving something that everyone identifies with this building.
The two windows down at that base landing right there cost
Yeah.
3,500 each window.
Yeah, I think what I had
So-
figured like 29. I got a price on like a standard window that looked the same from like a restoration window from Pella. It was like $29.50 plus for installation. And remember when I was just pricing it out with
So
the
that
lift
was
and two
10
guys
years ago,
and all
3,500.
this stuff. And it depends how you want to do it. If you want to do like quad pane stuff, but I mean, I think realistically the windows, yeah, an upgrade, anything's going to be an upgrade. And a double pane or a lower, not a lower end, but a more moderately priced triple pane window is going to put us a century ahead of where these windows are at. And so trying to go for the epitome of technology right now might not be cost effective, but we can make a huge upgrade for well under that $1 million number. And I was in the same, like, and looking at the numbers and then also calculating, I got the same in the three to $400,000 range. Seems like something that we could put nice, new, efficient windows in this.
And I believe that included putting all the basement windows
I
back
couldn't-
to
I
glass,
couldn't
which
tell.
I haven't found a good reason to do yet.
Yeah, I couldn't tell if it does. That way,
I think it does,
That's it,
but I
yeah.
don't, but it's hard to tell. It just says
Exactly.
windows,
yeah,
but they are proposing changing those windows, so I assumed that was part of it.
that's a good point. Yeah.
And I don't know. I've been told that there's a good reason for it, but I haven't seen it yet.
For the basement in particular, yeah, it seems like that's,
Now, I'd heard that if we change the windows, it triggers changing the,
HVAC.
yes.
Yeah, I've talked to Jeff repeatedly about that. We've kind of gone back and forth, and then I've talked to some other people about it, and I've got varying opinions, and I also have an opinion that's different than a lot of their people's, and just kind of, I think people are all over the map. I mean, the best case scenario would be that you change the windows in the envelope, and then you rebuild the HVAC to deal with the new heat load or cooling load that you have, because it changes when you change the stuff.
Right.
The flip side of that is that if you put more efficient windows in, the heating system will still heat sufficiently because you've reduced the heating load, and might be an air change issue.
Yeah,
If you don't do something about it, but that's a pretty easy thing to solve. And also I think it's what a bunch of the builders had said is that it's naive to think that all of the air leakage from a building that's 100 and something years old comes only from the windows. And so if you're shooting for 0.25 air changes per hour and you have 1 air change per hour right now, you cut that in half, you still have twice as much air change as you want.
Yeah.
So I think that there is, yes, it's ideally we would do it all. I think there's also wiggle room according to some of the.
Right, because if you're doing, let's just say we do
Yeah.
let's say we do one side of the building a year.
Yeah.
It means
Yeah.
that by year whatever.
Yeah.
You know, we determine a certain number of years, by year whatever is when we start to look at the HVAC system. That's not a mandatory
Exactly.
immediate need that we can then.
There's
have
also
some
really
planning for.
basic ways to solve just like localized humidity issues that there are like in bathrooms with bath fans and all that. That would need to be in place anyway. And so it wouldn't be the ideal system in the interim, but it would be more comfortable than what we have now.
And if we're gonna talk about the building and changes to the building, are we gonna ever know if we're gonna have a police department ran out of this building and that we have to keep that space? Because that's not really fair to this committee to not really have a direction, because there's a whole space right there
Yeah.
that could be used by radiate.
Is there,
Yeah.
Not worried about radiate at all. We can move them right to
Makes the
that space.
negotiations of all that space allocation much easier if we have that
Yeah.
space to work with.
has there been any recent discussions in the select board about the police department?
The only real discussion has been that we've hired 1 police officer. I know the search is ongoing, and I think the last update is that it's just the 1 guy. There's no other interest, is my understanding. I'm not totally up. I haven't
Yeah.
checked in with Josh this
Right,
weekend.
right, I just,
Yeah.
I haven't been into what these rooms are right here. I mean, how big are those rooms right there?
No, yeah, I agree.
What's this wasted space over here?
Yeah. I just looked in
Do-
those, and they're full of storage
mean-
stuff. that's-
Yeah, it seems like
I
there's,
feel like Duncan's in a closet downstairs,
Yeah, right,
and I really would like to get him out of his closet.
yeah,
And I feel like the room for planning and zoning is way too large and Josh's office is way too large. I think some basic adjustments and changes could make the staff's jobs nicer,
but
more comfortable. But also, we've got a lot of wasted space in this building that we're
huge
not
huge amount,
using.
yeah. And
And so, but I don't
would dive
necessarily.
into doing that without doing like a real, a much larger rehab, but I agree that we can make.
Yeah, but you can add Josh's office could be created into 2 offices. I mean, it used to be a
Sure.
classroom.
Yeah. And up here, I mean, I don't know structurally how this all works, but there's gotta be room to reconfigure without tearing everything out and starting from zero.
right,
I mean, do we really need 3 rooms in a row? Because there's this room, there's one in the middle, and there's one on the end. So I'm just saying, I'm not looking to remodel and drop down walls. I'm looking to bring in some common sense and say, hey, could we use this space a little bit differently with some minor changes that benefit everybody? So that's why I'm saying, is the police department staying or going?
So do you want to create a, how do we phrase that?
I think the next pick on our list, you have windows, you have flood mitigation. I have police department, question mark.
Yeah,
Because
so
one of
you
the
wanna send that?
reasons we were doing this was because the police department needed a safer way to bring in people that were handcuffed. I don't think they do that anymore here.
No,
And I don't
think
know if
that-
they're ever going to, because now that the new state barracks is down in Williston, and they also have Heinsberg, what do they use this facility for? Do they use it to just come in and use a restroom? I'm not gonna be mean about it, but
Oh, I mean, it's a
do they-
legitimate use, but it's not it's not.
they
doesn't
could use other ones.
yeah,
I do think that there's been a little bit of a, and I'm not an expert on this, but I think there's been a little bit of like a strategy shift in how they deal with that if they were to arrest someone. I think that they bring them to VSP, they bring them to
Mhm.
Heinsberg, and I don't know if
Mhm.
that's because the Heinsberg guys are more comfortable over there? or-
Drive right in with a car.
Yeah, Heinsberg has a
Yeah.
facility.
It's
It's
easier, they're
built
meant
it's
for it,
built with
yeah.
a holding
They have an
cell, it's
actual
built
holding-
with a processing room, it's built
Yeah.
with a garage that closes.
So
and
it
it's
seems like that
valuable.
relationship's going to
Yeah.
endure for at least a while. And the VSP is always a good backup. I know. that they-
And if we go to a full-blown police department, let's be real. We don't necessarily have to house it in this building.
Yeah,
But then
If
have
we need to
build a new
have-
building.
No. Yes and no. There are other opportunities for us to make changes.
Yeah.
And so I don't think we plan, I think it's unrealistic. We haven't had a full police department, and I'm gonna say probably 10 years.
100%, yeah, I agree.
Okay, so I'm not planning 10 years down the road, 50 years or 100 years down the road to have them stay in that space that they're in down there. We know it didn't work before. We
Yeah, I
know
mean,
it's not gonna work in the future.
I agree. I think
There's
that.
still
the
stairs.
plan for what we would like to have long-term when we have immediate needs for space right now, and there's space sitting there that's completely unused. I mean, I understand the desire to have a police department and have them.
Storing weapons and ammo for no reason.
Yeah.
We have 5 cruisers. I'm not gonna go sing that song anymore. Well, I'll put the police department on my list to get an
Yeah.
answer about.
I think that's the right, for this committee, we're not gonna have that discussion. We just need an answer so we can plan ahead.
Correct.
I had a community member come up to me at the 4th of July when I was down at the park that he knew that I was on this committee, although I wasn't at that point, but said that we needed to tear down the post office and build a police station there. So-
Different perspective.
I'd like to keep the revenue from the post office. That is not,
That's what I told him.
Yeah, it's not, I mean, it's not gonna pay for the whole building, but it's a good amount of revenue, right?
Yeah.
I'd like to put on the short-term list of the maintenance stuff, post office. To actually go speak to the postmaster and say, if we came in right now, do some work, what do you need?
Well, I
Do you
think
need somebody to come in and strip the floors and I don't know what it's called, you know, where they bring the floors down, they strip them and then they put the new coating on the
Mhm.
floors? Do you need,
I think with the post office, we do have a serious flooding problem around the post office that's going to require some significant work, and I'd hate to put a lot of money, for instance, on the floors and then a year from now tear them up in order to fill in those trenches underneath, if that's what we ultimately decide that has to be done. So there's a lot of really pretty extensive work on that
what do you?
below
believe
the
is that?
post office.
What do you believe is the problem below the post office? I want to hear
Right,
it from
well-
your interpretation of
well-
everything you've read.
There's holes in the wall. that we
There's
see
cracks
out
in the
there, and
foundation.
when the
Yes.
flood wires do get up to levels that they have got up to recently, it comes through those holes and fills up those trenches on the inside. And something needs to be done about that. Now, they propose that we fill them all up with sand and then pour concrete over it, I believe. What I get, is that what you understood?
Are
I
the
think
trenches
that's what-
interior or exterior?
Interior.
The interior underneath the post
Yeah,
office.
it kind of
where
does
those
an L,
trenches-
it goes this way, connects the mechanical room out in an L and then goes
Yeah,
down in the post office,
so in addition to that.
underneath the post
They
office.
want to do some work on the wall, and I'm a little fuzzy as to exactly what that is, whether they were going to replace some of the blocks. It said assume 10% replacement, I think, as they're working on it. And then I saw something about pouring a concrete wall in place of some cement blocks somewhere, but I don't know where they're proposing that. So some work on that wall to fill those holes in some manner. And if you do that, do you need to fill in the trench? I don't.
What
know.
was the purpose of
Yeah.
filling the trench?
Cause it fills with water,
I think, yeah, so
and water stays in there after.
Yeah, it's kind of,
sometimes
it's
even
kind
just
of
a big
the,
rainstorm.
it's kind of the low spot.
Yeah.
It's lower than the
Rainstorm
mechanical room,
does
it's
go
lower
in
than
there,
everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't drain to anywhere.
So say the water comes in and the trench has been filled. The water's not coming from the trench, or it is coming in through the trench?
No, it comes in through the foundation, which is kind of cracked. and
Okay, so it
perforated,
comes in
and
through the foundation
And it comes, follows the trench
and
along.
it sits in the trench.
Goes in the mechanical room.
Okay, so it's still coming through the foundation. You fill the trench, it's still gonna sit on the floor. Right?
I mean,
So
the
you
trench
gotta,
is.
so we're talking about walls now. We gotta get to fix the wall before, right?
Yeah, yeah. we
I'm
got-
trying to think through this,
So
just
it's-
common
I think
sense,
it's-
not
I think it's,
engineer.
Because it's a block wall, they weren't confident that they could actually like waterproof it 100%. So filling in the trench would actually eliminate the low spot that the water would come through this, it comes through the foundation of the soil in, so they're gonna seal the wall on the outside, but also fill in with the wall, flush with the wall over.
I wondered if they weren't also worried
If it
that,
was a concrete wall, it'd be easy, we'd just spray it,
yeah, that if they,
Icon, and it would be like waterproof.
if they did waterproof the wall, the blocks, would they be worried about water pressure caving the whole thing in if they don't have something behind it?
If we're talking flow through vents, everybody,
Yeah.
they go in all the walls.
Yeah.
So the fact that you have a natural flow through right now, you're gonna open
I think
up
we
that
should go-
crack.
I think we should
into
go
a
look at it,
flow-through.
it's not.
You're gonna,
Strange, but it's not it's like it's all like, it's not I know what you mean, it's not,
So-
this specific trench is not conducive to that.
I don't mean the trench, I mean the cracks in the wall are working as your flow through right now.
Yeah.
You're relieving exterior pressure by allowing
Yeah.
water to seep through those
No,
cracks.
I don't know what the plan
cracks.
is for that.
So if we put in flow through vents that are designed to, once the water hits them, flip open and let water in.
But how high, my question, we were talking about earlier, where do they put those vents? So how high up are they? Are they?
They're just
are
at
they-
grade, so they can actually, they're supposed to be like, depends how you flood proof.
It said not, the spec that I read here was not more than a foot above grade.
Yeah,
So I
But
guess
that can
in the
be-
back. that
depending
would-
on what you're trying to do, it can be it's always a foot above exterior grade, but if your interior grade is below exterior grade, then you're in a different rating category and all
Okay,
that stuff.
so,
So it would always be a foot above, within a foot of exterior grade.
Mhm.
Yeah.
The goal would be to have part of the interior grade be the flush with the exterior grade.
So you're getting
Yeah.
my point with fixing
Yeah.
a wall and fixing a trench. When you might be putting in flow through vents, it's gonna change everything with what you've got.
Yeah, I mean, I guess,
So that goes to the flood mitigation with that, the flood proofing of the basement, but also that brings in the post office
Right.
problems is what I'll call them.
I mean, I think that trench goes 3 ways, it goes around the whole post, so. Basically, they do need to, if they're gonna fill that in, they need to tear the post office out pretty badly. And so I'd hate to spend a lot of money on the post office if in fact we are someday gonna have to do.
So I want to go to the post office and just ask, what are some basic, and I use the floor as an example, that's not really, I mean, they got 2 new toilets.
Yeah.
Was that your big problem? You need a couple of new
Right.
toilets? Is the sink leaking? What, just,
we were down there, when Matt and I walked through, we talked to them about it really briefly, and they actually didn't have a lot of complaints. We're like, what would you like if you could have anything? And they were like, it's not bad. We'd like some more coat hooks and stuff, and it was like the smallest
Yeah.
things, and we're like completely, what do you want? Like, we have plenty of room.
okay.
Like the things,
Their asks were minimal.
they were like the
when
things we
last time
really
surveyed
needed,
them.
yeah. The things they really needed were like new racking and sorting bins, and like, that's not
Yes,
town thing.
that's
yeah.
interior.
It
Good try.
seemed like in the plan that they had, there was a different floor plan, some different wall locations or
They were,
something.
they're in that conceptual design that we put out before, they had moved a couple of, I think, interior walls because they were gonna we talked to the postmaster. The idea was moving the mechanicals out of the
Right,
basement of
right.
this
So they're
building
taking some of
and
that.
creating a little mechanical
Yeah,
room
yeah.
off the back of the loading
Yeah,
dock, which is
yeah.
now kind of dead space back there. And they said, yeah, sure, fine, we don't need that. And they were going to get a new bathroom and they were excited about that. But
Okay.
other than that, they didn't
Want
want or
a lot of
need any
changes. It sounded
design
like they might
changes
be-
or flow changes in their space.
Kind of looked like they were maybe wanted to put the post office boxes a little differently or something. There was a little indent there or something. I didn't
Yeah.
understand what it was.
Then
but I
again,
saw-
those were all conceptual designs,
Okay,
so
so-
nothing
so-
was final in terms of this is
Okay,
what it would look
okay.
like, but they were not gonna have
any
really
major outbreak. So
significantly
they're not
different
looking for
space.
anything big in there.
So
other than-
A
since
small-
they are our largest tenant, if you guys are okay, I'll just do a stop in, a confirmation,
Sounds great.
making sure that, maybe the person you spoke to was all happy, but somebody else knows, hey, there's this problem we got going on that everybody
Yeah.
forgets about,
Yeah.
so that's addressed.
lighting, because I don't know where they're at with the replacement of
I
the
see that on-
fluorescent lighting, like they don't make literally the bulbs anymore, you can't get the bulbs
No.
for what we have currently. And so they've been trying to replace some of the lighting fixtures and lighting literally.
That
like
was on the,
tubes.
yep, that
So
was
I
on
think
your
lighting needs to be
April.
completed.
lighting. We'll just, so
Yeah.
are we gonna inquire where they're at?
I would ask because I know some things have been changed, but not everything.
Now, we're talking about smaller changes we can make. Are we still considering proposing something larger than that? I mean, have we given up on actually going back? My understanding was we were looking at the original proposal and saying, where could we save some money here and get this down to something more reasonable? Are we still thinking that way, or are we just
I'm
gonna
not.
piecemeal things? Well,
No, I'm not
You know,
piecemealing, no, I'm. just
Off the
wanna
top
talk
of my head,
immediate
I still think
maintenance.
that would be my goal, would be to
Yeah.
present something that's scaled down.
Big
but I
scale,
know-
yes,
Scaled down, but I still think that some broader project that addresses
Yes.
most of these issues is still the way I would like to go.
and I am agreeing with that,
Personally.
with that.
so, yes, a broad project, but if we can do pieces of it now on the, before we.
To
go for
reduce that
all
huge
good.
cost, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think I'm still for the big project. Don't get me wrong with that,
Just not big.
but I think it's going to take us a year to know where we stand and what we understand from the flood mitigation
Yeah.
to the windows, to really developing a capital plan of maybe it's not a one big project, all $10 million project. Maybe it's going to take $1 million for this phase of this year, another $1 million for this phase, those kinds of things that we can look at. I'm not 100%, I'm just talking out loud. But what I wanted to address was the fact that some of the maintenance the can has been kicked down the road for years, that I just want to take care of some of the immediate needs of maintenance now.
I have no problem with that. I just don't want to lose sight of the.
I'm not for the
larger
big
issues.
project. I'm
And-
not for the $10 million project that was
Well, I'm
already
not for the $10
proposed.
million project either, but I'm for some piece of that we feel needs to be done. I mean, I think that it's one thing saying, can we fix it up so not quite as much water gets into the building or something now? But if you read these documents here on what it takes to fully comply with the FEMA regulations for flood proofing this building, we need to look at what we really need to do there to do that. And that entails moving people and equipment out of the basement, which means we have to put them somewhere else, which just drives a whole lot of other things. And so, I'd like to really understand what we want to do ultimately with the flood mitigation. And then if we can do some pieces of it, that's great. But
Yeah, I mean,
That's why it's number one on the list for all of us. I think we're all in agreement,
Yeah.
number one on the list.
I
And
think,
it looks like, and most of it, I've been going through these documents, just looking at the flood part of it, trying to understand what they are proposing, and it's hard to pick it all out. Obviously, moving everything out of the basement is obvious. The flood. My first thought was, they've said that it's not practical to dry flood proof this place, and I said, well, why not? But when I read in there that to fully dry flood proof it, you have to flood proof it to 2 feet above the high flood level there, which puts the post office underwater and so forth, so
Yeah.
they're right.
Yeah.
And so then if you're wet flooding it, then we have to, what would I gotta say here? You let the water in, they're putting valves in the floor, which I understand why they're doing that, I do know someone whose house had that issue, the water got underneath and left it just flab up, and they're worried about doing that. So they're gonna put those in, and then there's putting in these vents in the windows, and it says, but this is a problem because the windows are higher than the flood level, and so how are we gonna do that? And it said, we have some ideas, but I didn't hear them. They also talked about putting some sealant on the outside of the foundation, and as I said before, there's some reference to an excavation document of some kind that I couldn't find. Are they talking about digging down deep and flood proofing that, or are they just doing it above ground, or what's really proposed there? And where these flood vents go, in the window, if the windows are too high, they said the ideas. But that back wall out here, we just talked about, the grade is a lot lower than those windows, so do we need a flood vent a foot off from the lowest point of that wall? And if we fill up higher than that inside, that flood vent doesn't do any good. So there's a lot of details there as far as what was really proposed and is it all needed?
Yeah, I think that my take on it is that that's the most complicated part of this whole project, simply because of the. I mean, a lot of the flood stuff's not. There's like the flood manual, and there's very clear dimensions and all that,
Yeah.
but when you start actually rehabbing an old building and not building a new one, and like
Yeah.
what you can get away with and how those dimensions
Yeah,
and
right.
flood, you know, floors relative to flood level and all that works. It's not ambiguous, but there is little gray areas, and I would like to know how that plan, what the plan is and what it's gonna cost to do that. It's a pretty big
Mhm.
expense, and I don't think it's unnecessary.
They triggered substantial improvement by doing the $10 million project. So you were required to do to a level of regulations that is not required for us if we're going to do maintenance and repair of this building. There's a big difference.
Yeah.
So
I think like Mike and I were saying, we're both thinking that I don't think even if we cut it in half and we did a $5 million project 3 years from now, we're still gonna trigger a substantial renovation or improvement by doing that renovation.
right,
So we should have a plan in place. 'Cause At
Correct.
some point, we'll trigger that. It's only
correct.
A third of the total value, right? If we do a third of the total value in work over like a 5-year period, how is this substantial?
Now it's 50%.
50%? Over how many years?
I think they played around with that number. It's different for residential versus
Sure.
commercial. I don't think they really drilled down too heavy on the commercial side. I think it was more the residential. And just to let you know, the regulations can change because Richmond's regulations exceed FEMA's regulations.
Yeah, exactly.
So if it's something that's realistic for us, we have plenty of time to propose to change the floodplain regulations. I really want to know what's in the best interest of saving this building and preventing or allowing flow through water to happen, and all the mechanical and all the human beings, both of them are
And it's safe.
mitigated, we're safe.
Yeah.
That's my goal in my head. As far as what they proposed before and all this kind of stuff, I'm not there right now because I don't know. I want to know, my first question is, what's the base flood elevation? What's the elevation of the floor downstairs? What's the first floor elevation above that? And having all of
There's
those
some
numbers.
ambiguity in this document here, but in that there was a couple of surveys done that don't totally match, but it does tell you what the floor elevations are. It tells you what the two surveys have said, and they aren't that far apart that it's. So we have a lot of that information that you just.
Yep,
Yes.
so I'd look at that and make sure if they have ambiguity or what's different, then I'll assume the worst case scenario. And go from that, but I think I agree, that's our big project, looking forward. Amy, you've been wanting to say something, so.
I'm wondering if an item for our small, I mean, I guess this is a small list, is to use some funds to actually contract a maintenance staff person. So that it's not Mary coming in to clean windows and Duncan up on ladders, changing light bulbs. And if somebody who had some knowledge about how to fix small problems as they arise, again, Duncan's great with a roll of duct tape, but that's probably not like a long-term maintenance solution for some of the things that we run into. And so to have somebody who was, not maybe necessarily a full-time staff person, but someone who came in on a regular basis and sort of could look around and assess small problems and take care of them as they came up.
I think my fear of that is it starts fine and dandy to begin with, and then nobody oversees them so that things don't end up happening, right? So I put on the list,
What if we contract? Instead of contracting someone to come put hours in, we contract someone to propose things.
property maintenance.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Property maintenance
Property
company
maintenance.
that we call and say, this is the problem.
Yep.
So person versus company is where I'm in my head, so that you can say, hey, this is what's going on. Can you send somebody within the
Yeah,
next
It's a
week?
small company with 1 or 2 guys, that's fine, but yeah, I think that's. Is
But I
that kind
think
of
we
what you had in mind? or-
Yeah, and just somebody who's not the town staff,
100%
who are
agree.
supposed to be doing other things,
Who have-
who are now all of
We're
a
hiring
sudden
for a
spending
different skill
hours a
set,
day
yeah.
changing light bulbs, that.
But who knows what needs to be done? I mean, it's the town staff. I mean, maybe there's
They might-
some place for a report when the light bulbs go out and.
Right, they might know what needs to be done,
Yeah.
but they
Right,
are
don't know
probably
how
not
who
the
to-
best person
to do
to
it.
actually do the
But I'm
repair.
trying to figure, how do we get the information from the person that he knows?
Oh,
what's
we
being
can-
Oh,
done?
the town staff knows.
They can
and-
relay.
Yeah, but it's, they shouldn't necessarily be the ones fixing
Yeah,
the problem.
If there's some way to enter in that the light bulb in this conference room is out or something that somebody can.
A
Which is
spreadsheet.
what's happening right now, so,
It's good with a spreadsheet, but we don't want them using the duct tape.
yeah.
Yeah,
I get what you're saying. I
Yeah.
put it on the list. I'm still very much interested in what the list is.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think this is the list. This is the list of what's happened and what can happen in the future.
Yeah.
But now I need to see that list of what the little list that we've started, I think is gonna be much bigger. Like, are there any leaking sinks? Are there any leaking toilets? That's impacting your water and sewer department. That's,
Are we gonna, I guess my question is, are we gonna go through and find all this stuff, or are we gonna put this on?
we've asked Duncan to prepare a list for next time.
And I don't think, not that Duncan keeps getting thrown in.
Well, he's the one that's having to use the duct
But-
tape. So if we can take the list out of
So he-
his.
he
He
has
of
the
what's
list.
going wrong in the building, yeah,
what do people do now if the light bulb's out? They go tell Duncan?
Yeah, and then Duncan gets up on a ladder and changes it.
Yeah, right.
Cause
So we go-
we haven't historically
Yeah.
invested in anybody to take care of and maintain the building.
I guess I keep questioning whether, not that I don't think that, this isn't saying that we shouldn't deal with this, because I don't want to, but it doesn't even seem, based on why I thought we were joining this committee, it seems like something that we should just tell the select board. And I hate telling it, like, there's not even anyone doing maintenance. You need to find someone, you need to get Josh to find someone to do maintenance, and you need to do maintenance, and you gotta do it within your budget. Like, this committee is looking at what we do with this building more philosophically,
Yeah.
and
I agree.
and where we want it to be in 1, 2, 5, 10 years.
Yeah.
And for us having to do all this, it's like, I'm completely, not that it's not a waste of everyone's time, but like, this is kind of a waste of our time to like have to come up with this list and like make.
I disagree because this can, like I said, has been kicked down the road for
Sure.
5 to 10 years. And I'm tired of it.
I'm not saying that.
And I don't think the select board's gonna do it. They're gonna put it on Josh. It's gonna get put on Duncan. And then it's gonna be all over right back where we are. So my point is, let's at least give 5 things.
Okay.
Give the select board 5 things to accomplish.
That
So we
sounds
can
reasonable.
check
I just-
box that
I-
we did something other than talk about doing it for a year.
Yeah.
Like the entrance downstairs looks like crap. The carpets could be ripped up right there, and I don't care for painting the concrete floor and
It's
just
just-
having the runner
I just still
carpet.
think it's not the best
basic-
use of our time to go
basic
through and find all that stuff. Like, if we make a list of 5 things.
I got 5 things, I got 6 things on the list right now.
So I guess that was where I was
We're
going with
good.
that is, are we gonna try to like hash all these things out and vet them all? Or are we just gonna give them the list? As it is?
Nope, here's
If
the
we come With
list.
this list and give it to them, I
Here's the list.
say, keep
Pointing
saying
and
them, like,
brick.
this isn't gonna screw me.
What's that?
Yeah, I keep saying them like it's not gonna screw me.
You'll be there to
My
say,
turn.
yes, you have to do this. That's all you have to
Exactly.
do.
But I guess I don't want to spend time with all of us like vetting the necessity of all these things and how we're gonna do them and all. that.
It's 5 things on the list.
Okay.
Pointing the brick exterior, make sure doors, locks and
Mhm.
keys. When was the last time they were changed? Is everything functioning? Does anything need to be repaired? Where are
Yep.
we at with that? The lighting, confirm with Duncan. The maintenance company, there's a couple things on this list, such as the maintenance company and checking with the post office to
Yeah.
confirm that they're okay. But so the keys are really 4: pointing, doors, lighting, and I want the entrance cleaned up.
Okay,
I want
yeah,
it.
so I think that's
the
great. I think
main
we should
entrance
push
of
those
this
things
building.
off.
Come into that place and the carpet, we've got salt stains, whatever that stuff is, all over. It just looks like you're coming in the back entrance. Nobody comes in the front from the parking lot.
Yeah. I agree.
That's all cobwebs when you go through that usually.
Actually, I tried to go in there one day and the door was locked.
Yeah, so I think that's a great plan. I was just concerned that we're gonna continually.
No
be
more
like,
list, that's it.
Yeah, we're gonna keep going with this and it's gonna turn into our job. It's
So,
like
no,
maybe the
and
main-
say next,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
say, so I
think
can
that's a great
draft
plan.
something and prepare it. If you guys all agree, do we need to make a motion or are we in a happy place that those 4 things, those 4 things, while we research a couple of the other ones, like the maintenance company and
So
the
that's,
post
I guess
office.
that's what I was gonna say with the maintenance company. I don't think we should even bother. I think we should say this needs to be done and we shouldn't we shouldn't find a maintenance company. We shouldn't have to
I
do it because
agree.
none of us are experts at it. But I
No.
do think there needs to be some I would say accountability, that's the wrong word, like maybe follow through for us to make sure like, hey, this is actually accomplished, right? Because it's been kicked. It needs to happen.
I'd want to start with the things that we want them to these 4 things that we want them to do and see how they do with that. I like the idea of that, but we can propose that to them after we see what happens.
Sure.
And we get the list from Duncan, because the list from Duncan of the immediate needs of repairs will drive us, if we need to have a maintenance company come in to oversee this list of repairs, that we then pass the whole ball to the select board and say, here, we cleaned this up for you, we organized it, here you go. We even prioritize the maintenance stuff that we think a maintenance company could come in and do.
Makes sense.
That makes me feel like we've done something. I need to feel like I've accomplished something to stay here. If you can't tell that right now.
Yeah.
Then we start, we as a committee
Yeah,
are tackling these major
bigger questions. Yeah.
bigger picture
Okay.
items.
I think, so yes, I agree with that. I just wanted to make sure, I guess my worry is that we get in the habit of dealing with this
Just
small
maintenance.
stuff and keep doing it, and it's like, we don't have time to really
Do anything
tackle the
else.
broader.
No, but we're
Okay.
giving the
I think
power,
starting off that way and showing that
organize it.
we're
yeah.
looking at it from small stuff all the way up to.
How many windows are we fixing? Replacing. I don't know if that was that last agenda, if there's, are we done
Yeah,
with?
well, we kind of have we were talking about past and future building maintenance, and then we talked about the next item is update on previous agenda items and mission statements, which I think we kind of.
If anybody
there's
had any,
much to say about that. And then there's discussing establishing a capital management.
and that was where
That
we
was
get
the
into
big
the
item.
bigger items.
I have a very brief update on one of like just that energy in an envelope audit, and it sounds like we can get I've been trying to figure this out. Efficiency Vermont has reshuffled in the last year and a half. It's really tough to nail this down. It sounds like we can get a free or heavily subsidized audit. I still need to reach out to Jeff to confirm specifically what has been done, because I don't know if you have any idea or what's been done there. Is that
And
really a Jeff
Not off the
question?
top of my head, that's a Jeff
Okay.
question.
But it sounds like we can get some kind of very heavily subsidized or free audit. That's not going to be like an engineering audit. It's going to be like a walkthrough kind of identifying.
Rattle the windows.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. And what we really need, I think, we need that as a base to start from, but what we really need is like an HVAC engineering audit where they look at the actual envelope and the insulation values and the windows and all that, and kind of, I wouldn't say help us chart, but we chart a path forward and they tell us how that's going to impact our requirements, and tell us like, hey, you're not going to likely have moisture issues if you do the windows, or you will, or your HVAC will work if you do the windows, it won't, et cetera. And I think that's not going to be free, and that's going to be something we're gonna have to hire an actual engineering firm to do.
I want
But
to make sure we're on record.
yeah,
There was no energy audit that was paid for, that they
It's
were working
my-
off of
is my
for the
understanding.
plans that we've all been reviewing.
It's my understanding, no, but I don't know that 100%.
When I did a tour of the building, when Jeff took us on the tour of the building, I asked the question, I said, do we know how much money, how much energy we were gonna save if we put new windows in here? And he said, no. And he said that there was an energy audit scheduled or coming up or something. So at that point, slightly before the vote, there had not been an energy audit, but they were in some way thinking about it. I don't know where it was in the process.
So for me to make a decision about replacing windows and replacing the HVAC system, yes, we will need that at
Yes.
some point in time.
I guess
But
that
I'm
was
just
my concern
surprised
is-
there wasn't one.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Yeah, I think just my hunch is that there's more reasons to replace the windows than just the energy issues, but obviously they're heavily interconnected, and the HVAC, obviously, we couldn't, short of repairing what we have or relocating
Right.
the same style system for flood reasons, if we're gonna do anything to the HVAC, we need to do that. And I think that's one of the things, I think, just having talked to Marshall, who installed the boilers, and talked to people that do boilers, like we have time with these boilers, but like we're also not, we're in the back half of their kind of estimated lifespan.
Yeah.
They could last 30 years. but they don't usually. The, you know, smaller wall hung, not the bigger, but smaller wall hung units are like 15 to 25 year lifespan. So we're to the point where we're gonna have to do something within likely in a decade anyway. And so I think we need to,
Which goes to the capital
Yeah,
plan, which
exactly.
that puts this energy audit as another item. Another item on the capital.
precursor to to the
It's,
developing capital
it's
plan.
part of it, and where we put it in it, I think we start with the free audit.
Yep.
Get some basic information and a basic understanding so that we know the right questions to ask to do that paid audit. Because sometimes we're having something done that we don't know what we're looking for, and what they give us doesn't help us with what we're looking for.
Agree.
I think if we're, talking about putting in that HVAC system, we just have to do the windows first.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that
It's.
it sounds like it's possible to do the windows as a standalone item.
We're gonna have a
Yeah.
whole flow chart here,
Yeah,
guys. We're
exactly.
gonna have a whole
Yeah,
flow
there's
chart.
gonna be a whole
and this
Gantt
is
chart,
gonna
and we're gonna-
happen,
things
this
are gonna
and-
have to. Yes, I think you're right. The windows would have to happen either concurrently or before.
Right, and that's what I'm saying, like 1 year this side, 1 year that side.
Yeah.
I've been nervous from the beginning about this heat pump system and does it work in cold
yeah,
weather and so forth. And
Yeah.
I have done some research there and I found I think it's the Du Bois and King thing here, they told which company they were planning to buy it from, and I actually got on their site and looked and they said, it goes down to -16. But when I read it further, then it starts degrading from there. So you're still getting something out of it down to -40 or something and.
Bring your jackets to work with you guys.
It may get chilly in here. The other thing that there are some resistance electric heaters planned in here as well.
Just for the
And
back,
certain-
for the one or the design day.
I think the
every year.
basement has some of the interior hallways and so forth. We're not,
That's
I
pretty,
guess
that's
the-
pretty.
We're putting electric in the basement with it flooding. Flow through
they're high
vents.
up on the ceiling, I suspect, but.
They're insulated.
Yeah.
Like a
Inside
tea kettle.
Airproof box, but.
With all the news with what's happening and people putting back in secondary heating systems because the
Yeah.
design and the primary,
Yeah.
what was already done, the heat pumps, yes, they've changed, they've gotten better. I'm not there yet. I can be educated on I can be educated on the heating system when we get there.
Yeah, and I think that
I'm getting closer.
the longer we wait, the more info we have.
And the more
better the
They're
systems
being
are.
built better.
The other
So
thing,
if
They're,
we look
they're
at
even
the
better now
impact,
than 5 years ago.
for us to do that in a certain number of years, it'll be even better.
And maybe it'll be warmer too.
and also.
Great.
As I was reading through there, I think this thing's gonna cost us $750,000 or something like that to put it in, and it has like a 15-year life, which is about halfway through the financing that we have to put in.
Yeah,
And so that bothered me a bit, but
Me too,
Yeah,
me too.
yeah.
Other major
So that was my
capital things
update.
when we look at, because we've jumped to that item on the
Yeah.
list, is we have to look at roofs, the life of roofs, the life of every piece to the structure has to be on that capital plan list. And even if we take the library's capital plan list and just change it to town center and say, okay, here's what we've got on the list. What is the age of it right now? When was it done? What's the life of it? To see when the cycle is to be replaced.
How much do we need to replace it?
Well, we can have a
Or-
ballpark, what the value is
Estimate.
today versus what the value will be in the future. Do we agree that we think we should use the libraries as a template to start with for a capital building plan? Or do we want to start from scratch
Um,
and add things?
I'm not familiar what they have for the library. Do they have a?
they have a plan that kind of estimates the kind of all the broad, bigger things in the,
I thought we'd just take that spreadsheet and
and then they kind of
Tweak it.
assign a number and a lifespan
so
to
they
it.
don't-
And I think that's what we would ultimately need, right? And then like, the best case scenario would be that independent of a rehab or after a rehab, we would reevaluate that, update it, and then we would either put money in reserve or we would do whatever. And so that there wouldn't be these shocks where we need to spend $400,000 on roofs and painting or whatever. It would just be budgeted and it happens, and
Yep, just like buying a new dump truck.
I'm never buying a new dump truck, but.
Well, the town has, so you have.
True.
You own part of it.
Get my
That's a
ride in that dump
taxpayer.
truck.
There you go. Are we
yeah,
good? Are
exactly.
we okay with that?
I
If
think that's
I think roof is lowest on our list because it's
Oh, yes.
in good shape.
Right, but I
knock
just
on
wanna
wood right
have
now,
the
but
site a
yeah,
little bit.
But probably at the bottom, a roof.
Can you do you mind requesting from the library, and it might even, Josh might even have it, is the spreadsheet of their capital plan so that we can actually just plan out? And yeah, I agree with you. I think the library might, I mean, the roof might be one of the last things
Yep.
on the list, don't get me wrong. But there's gonna be things on that list that we haven't even thought about.
Yep.
You know, like
So-
when do you replace the carpets? When do you paint the interior? When do you do exterior painting? All of those things are on the library list because they've been doing them all.
Yep.
Yeah.
We can add our brick in there because brick needs to be done every few. Yeah, so what are we gonna call that? We a capital maintenance plan, just so we
Yeah.
kind of stay ahead of it. Yeah.
If that's okay, I wanted to make sure that.
No, I think
because
that's a great idea.
the little good things, we're talking this big capital changes, but let's have it on a plan so that if we start to see the years of things that they're supposed to be, quote, expired, maybe that will coincide with something that we should be doing anyhow.
Yeah, yeah, if we're gonna spend $100,000 on. I don't know.
A new,
when-
let's say,
for-
we gotta replace the furnace. How much is it gonna cost us to replace the furnace if we went with something similar size, similar location, blah, 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 blah?
It's moving it.
We're at this, but this is the year we were gonna do that anyhow. Well, maybe we,
Yep, and then we're not wasting the money of getting rid of the asset that's still functioning and
right, that's my fear, is getting rid of the asset that's still
not
functioning.
the end of life.
Yep. Way before its end of life, I'm hoping. This is where my head has been, and I don't mean to take over the meeting and direct us and be, I gotta feel organized, like we're doing something.
I know what you mean. I want to feel like we've accomplished something because I think, a lot of people in town see the committee and there was so much hard work put in and everyone's like, well, what do they have to show for it? And we all know that there's a ton of work and there's this project that's like, we can do some small things that kind of ease that.
Those are small things. I think I still don't want to lose sight of the big thing.
No, we're gonna talk at our next meeting about the big things. We're gonna
Okay,
start the
okay.
talk about the big things.
Only the big
We're gonna
stuff.
take a little bit of our time to make sure what we ended up happening with those little, we're gonna basically send the select board on little errands.
Yeah,
You do these
No,
little things.
that's fine. That's fine. I just
Big
don't.
picture, big picture. Where did we end up going though with the presentation that you and Matt did for Arts Company about a owner rep and the owner rep that was the library owner rep, and if they were interested in being the owner rep for this? Okay, now I want to understand, is it okay if I ask that question? Because this is a follow-up to our previous agenda items, is
Yeah.
that owner rep thing. The owner rep comes into play at what point of this? From the very beginning, when we're looking at creating a capital maintenance plan, seeing the life of things? Or where would they, or when we start to get deeper into it and looking at the major improvements that we potentially are making to the building, where do they come in?
Like in this specific project or just broadly?
Yeah, no, this,
I mean,
where do you see them fitting into
okay.
this? At
I
what
think
point
that
in
for the
time?
for the capital maintenance plan we're talking about and for the smaller stuff, I don't think there's any need to have an owner's rep, a hired owner's rep with construction management experience. Seems very unnecessary. For the project, if we were to do a more substantial capital improvement project, like, a rehab or something along those lines, I guess I'm unsure exactly when that would become beneficial, depending on how big the project is. I think the bigger it is and the more interconnected it is, the sooner that would be helpful, given given we have a person with the right experience to help us manage that interconnectedness with people moving around, coming up with a plan there. I think depending on who we were to hire and what we were to expect, there would be a chance to help us present it in an accurate way and show specifically why we are doing it. Now, I think a lot of owners reps come in, kind of a lot of the skill set for many of them is to come in once the project's approved.
That's what I was
But I do
wondering.
think there's room for us to actually use I guess owner's reps may be the wrong word, but that's kind of the word
More
that comes to mind.
Project manager
A project
to
manager.
propose the project and
Exactly.
oversee the
Yeah.
completion of this,
Yeah.
the implementation and
Be
the
a project,
completion of the
like
project.
an owner hired project manager that help us present it and explain why we're doing X amount of things for X dollars.
Yep.
And then once it's money's approved, help us contract and execute that.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing where we bring them in
Yeah.
and we
I
talking.
mean, I think it's undecided, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it
Right.
would be, what do you think?
I mean, I think, I'm a little confused,
Yeah.
it's exactly what this person is. I mean, I think once we start into the construction of it, we need somebody, you're gonna have multiple contractors here, electricians, plumbers, excavators, whatever else, masons. Somebody has to make sure that they're all here and the,
Yeah, I mean, I think that would fall, so that coordinating all those things would fall on, we would have to hire a general contractor. to do
so,
this. So we would,
a general contractor is different than the owner's.
yeah, an
rep.
owner's rep would, how I envision it and kind of how I've worked with owners reps on commercial projects is they don't represent, because a general contractor is doing what's in the contract. They
Yeah,
don't
they're
represent,
con-
they
they're
don't
their own
necessarily
interest.
represent your best
No,
interests.
the general contractor takes care of their own interests to
Owner's rep and
fulfill the
owner
contract.
hired project manager represents specifically the owner's best interest. So it'd be, and in this case, it'd be the town. If you're a private person, they would work for you to
So they're-
ensure.
They're looking over the general contractor's shoulder.
Yeah, and then they also lend expertise that a general contractor is not going to help you ahead of time explain why that. We're in a unique position
Yeah.
because we're not just like a corporation doing a project. We're a town doing it. So we have to
Yeah.
get everyone on board. We have to explain why it's necessary. And we don't have to get people on board by convincing them. I don't think that's the right way to look at it. We have to get them on board by explaining why. Because I think people, if we come up with a reasonable, good project, we don't have to convince people. We just have to explain it to them.
Well,
Does that make sense? There's a difference there, but
yeah, well, I'm not sure I agree. I think we have to convince them before they're gonna vote to give us the money.
He's
I
saying
get-
through, he's saying convince them, but through education.
yeah, not
First,
just tell them like,
transparency
trust
that you
us, we did all the work.
Right,
Trans-
exactly, and I.
education.
Show
but-
people that it's needed.
But I think one thing that the old committee didn't do as well as they could have was tell people why this was needed.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
and exactly.
They couldn't
what we're
answer some of the
planning to do. I
questions.
think they did an awful lot of outreach and so forth, but I think when it came, that was my problem with it, is that nobody told me why we were doing this.
And I think that having having a owner hired project manager with the right skill set would help us, could, with the right person, depending on the size of the project, help us to specifically drill down. Because have someone that would spend more time than we can as a committee, coming up with specific numbers and answers to questions that will, I wouldn't say alleviate those concerns, but give people the information they need to understand why the project's necessary.
And I can disagree with Mike on that, because I feel like they did outreach. They had public meetings, they let the public know. What the chair of that committee could not do or did inappropriately was did not answer the direct questions asked and gave the wrong answers to begin with. And I'm gonna go to the roof on the post office and said it was load bearing for snow. And that was not a fact. Until I said, I need the calculations that the engineers were using for the load bearing calculation, that if you're putting an inch or two of insulation in that roof, it's triggering you to have to redo the whole roof system. And that's where then he came back out and said it was for the solar panels. That is not the way I want to work.
Yeah.
So if a project manager can answer a technical
I think
question, we should
that-
have them there
Yeah,
to
I
do
have
that
that.
and not us.
Go ahead, Mike, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. No, that's just what, I envision. I mean, I think, if we have like 5 of us, and I guess I'm the chair, so I don't want to, like, I'm not going to be able to spend hours at any point, like hours and hours
Answering emails.
wrangling all that and getting questions and talking to the engineer and the architect and all that. And so that's where I don't envision an owner, like someone like Art or whoever, to come in early so that they can tell us what to do,
Yeah.
but they can run the interference and we can come up with the plan. We can vet that plan, and then someone like that would know all the parties involved. And so if a question was received, they would know who to ask and how to send that info out. So that those questions could be answered accurately and quickly. And I think that's the part where I say, we don't want to convince people, we want to just give them the info, but we do want to convince them by showing them that
Yeah, right.
it's necessary.
But even if we decide we want to do something like this, and this is the pieces, we might need to pull art in to say, okay, this is what we'd like it to do. Help us make sure we're accomplishing it in the
Yeah.
right order, the right way, because we want you to sell this product,
And for
to
the
sell it
same-
to the public,
exactly, for the
educate the
same reason,
public.
Art, or he's used to working with engineers and architects and translating our expectations and requirements into specific things. And so that's another, I mean, I'm comfortable, I'm used to doing that too, but like realistically, I'm not gonna do that. It's a full-time job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's something we need to we would need to hire someone to do.
You're doing this for free. You're not doing that for free.
And I think it would be a conflict if I were to do it for not free. So, and I don't want to.
Good, we're good. I just wanted to make sure I didn't want to.
That's how I
forget that
envision it.
piece
Does
of-
that make sense?
Yeah.
Why, I don't think that we're in a position where we want to hire anyone right now,
No,
but I do think that it would make sense to involve that person sooner in the process than previously maybe they would have been, or then.
And I think-
It makes sense to have someone, I guess. Say, maybe hire someone, but at a very low level to begin with, just to understand what we're
I
doing.
think we're not quite there yet,
Maybe not
but-
yet, but
but I think once we get into the process and we start, if we get into this and we decide, hey, we're gonna be doing something substantial. We all think we're gonna propose something. We're not quite sure how we balance, say we're not sure how do we shuffle around all this stuff? How do we weigh all these options for people and locations and all that space? That's then where we would be, okay, we have an expert to help us hash that out.
how do one of the things that we haven't, and I'll put it on the capital list there, is one of the things that we haven't done is we haven't talked about, using all the space, utilizing space,
Yeah,
right?
the whole thing's gonna be a police department.
just for you. You're gonna do that job too, for free, for free.
Do all these, town health officer, police department.
yeah.
So I guess my point with that, and the reason I brought that up is I don't think it's one of the top things, but I think it's something that we need to just remember that we have to talk about too and not forget it on a list. So I'm just putting it down, but I think by us building that capital maintenance plan, it's gonna give us items that we might not have thought about that we need to consider what we want to do with it and when we want to do it. And I don't know, I still haven't fully developed if this is a full plan, all done in a bundle for me, or if it's in phases.
Yeah.
I think the plan has to be complete.
Correct,
I
Good
don't
point.
know that the construction has to be done all. at
correct.
Even if it is a phased plan, it needs
Yeah.
to be a full plan with all the phases planned
And
out.
it can be phases of financing as well, I
Well,
guess
could
is
be,
my,
yeah, and-
is my
I
point.
mean, I
Funding
think
could be
financing
phased.
would drive it into phases. We had all the money in the world. we'd
But we
spend on it
shouldn't,
tomorrow,
we
but-
shouldn't
Right.
pitch.
But we can't forget that
Yeah,
piece, right?
No, and you're right. But I think. I don't know, what was I going?
Phase
I
based
don't-
on construction and phase based on funding on both. We need to remember both pieces of that, right?
You know, as we get into this. Bigger version of whatever we might do. I mean, I think everybody agrees we aren't going back to the voters with a $10 million request. We need to find ways to get some money out of this. And we've talked about a mess of different pieces of that and how to do it. But we've just been scattered all over the place. We haven't really focused on anything. And I kind of think we ought to identify possible areas and maybe just take them one at a time. And I know that previous chair here was gonna assign each of us something to do, and I really disagreed with that.
So when
I
you
think we
say,
need to all look at it, but I think maybe, and I think the place to start is the flood mitigation.
Yeah.
I wanna understand each one of these things that we propose well enough that I can explain it to the guy that walks up to me in the park on the 4th of July.
Yep.
And I don't right now. As I said, this guy came up, he had two things that he thought we should do, was tear down the post office and build a police station, and the other one was that we didn't need a new heating system. We just moved the one we got up to higher ground, and the post office part, I think I had a pretty good answer for. The other one I don't think I agree with, but I had a hard time putting the words together, why.
Yeah,
And so I think we need to go through each of those. Everybody look at all this pile of paper and see if any of us can find any of the pieces of it.
so when you say
Figure
go
out what
through
we wanna
pieces,
do.
you mean go through and look at places we can trim money out, or just look at things that and evaluate every part of the previous project or ideas and say, does it need to be done? And
My
what are your
first
thoughts?
thought was, we just start from the beginning and say, okay, we're gonna start in the basement and that's gonna drive some other things and go up through the, there's so much in here. We'd be working on that for 10 years. So I kind of think.
In their plan or
The
in general?
original, the
Okay,
plan
okay,
came out
okay.
of Black.
I agree with you,
Black-
100%.
It's so detailed in there that, we are, maybe Adam knows more than the rest of us, but we just don't have the expertise to go through and understand that in any.
I felt like it was buried too. I mean, the basic facts were buried in the details where it's like, why is there not a cover sheet directional piece of information that said,
Now,
here's the safety things we're addressing, here's the needs we're addressing, and here's the
Yeah.
wants and the extras that are gonna, and this is why we're doing all these different pieces. That was never there.
Why
I-
is the big one, yeah.
Of each section though.
It's not, yeah, not that they're not justifiable, just, it's just that there's a very documented.
And I found, I found a lot of answers actually in going back and reading the report that Breadloaf did 5 years ago.
That's the one that's better.
And I actually, that was written in English.
Yes.
And, and it described, it didn't say anything about flood mitigation in there. But a lot of the other things that I found out, as far as the HVAC system, they explained why that needed to be different than it is, which I didn't find anywhere in this. That they're basically, the ventilations.
If we do get into this, this is like a very philosophical, like a
Mhm.
big turning point, but if we do get into this and we decide that yes, it is worth doing this project and we do want to reshuffle things inside and do these improvements. I know Breadloaf, and I think there's a couple other companies that would do this, but Breadloaf had done the project. They said, give us a budget and we will come up with a proposal.
Yeah.
And we'll
Yeah.
do that.
And I think that's the way you go.
Yeah, and I know.
That's the better way to
Build
go.
always, design build, I think has a bad, not a bad reputation, but it has it's kind of a buzzy thing for people to say. Cause you hear someone to design build house, we do design build for residential and high-end residential and stuff. But for commercial properties and industrial properties, design build's very common. And it's a much more vetted and reviewed process and established process. It's not like a timber framer who's designing things as he shows up to work every day. It's one company that has an engineering and architecture team on staff, and they're integrated with their construction management team. And so the costing and all that stuff is very integrated, which is a good chance to be more accurate and save money there. And also it means we don't have to be the middlemen where we would design a project, work with whoever as an architect, and then go price it out and then be shocked when it's not
Yeah, right.
price and go back and redo it all. And so obviously, yeah, there's benefits to both. It just seems to me with the amount of, we're all volunteers, and with the amount of expertise we have, a design build might get us something workable that puts this building and makes this building more usable sooner for less money, without us all having to become experts and quit our jobs to hash it all out. Because that's
Yes.
really strikes me as what
I don't have that problem.
it's
but
so. Oh, so Mike's gonna do it. No, but it's such a complicated project that short of either hiring someone to manage all that
Yeah,
and telling them so it's gonna be a design build project no matter what,
Yeah.
whether we contract someone to design it and then we contract someone
Somebody
else to build it, then we're the design builder and we've just subbed
Right.
those two things out, or
Right.
we hire one company to do it all. It's going to be a design build. So it makes sense to me to integrate it all. I'm not saying we should do that and that's the path we should go down, but I would just.
We'll keep it open, where our mind
I would
is
mull
open to that
over, 'cause
discussion now.
In my mind, this is such a complicated project with so many nuances in the design and the construction, and some companies do things different ways, that having those two things integrated makes sense to me.
The bread loaf was originally 1.5 million, I think,
I have no
off the
idea
top
what
of my head. I think it's still out on the website too. we might all want to just go back to the bread loaf 1.5.
See
See
what
what
they're-
was on that list, see what they were proposing to do, see what they said needed to be done. We all know construction costs, even if we
It's an
double it.
alarmingly small number.
You know,
Even
and
even if we double it to 3 million,
Even if we triple it, it's still.
Yeah, they have.
I'm not
They-
doing
they-
No, but depending what.
$10 million, so
depending-
don't get that high.
Depending what would be, what was proposed.
Right,
though, and what
so we
do
can
for
look
that.
back. My point to you is that's part of my, I'm putting that on my list of
Yeah,
homework
but-
things to do, and maybe they have a better list, and I think they did have a better list
the-
in there of what.
They have the last two pages of their report here, went down through and says, install code required automatic sprinkler system, $119,000. Install code required fire alarm system, $50,000. Install code required exit signage. They've got 2 pages of that down through here, what, in 5 years ago, what they thought the prices would be for the major items that they thought, and they, again, they didn't address flood mitigation at all in
I
this,
mean,
but-
the costs have obviously gone up substantially.
and they obviously
I
have
think
gone up since then,
Doubling it
but-
is,
but,
would be
Minimal.
very safe on our end.
you know,
If we double that, that would have us covered, and then we add flooding stuff in there, and that still seems workable.
Keep in mind that,
they
you
say
know,
windows,
whenever we're thinking about the cost for construction, we have to remember the soft costs that go along with that
Yes,
as well.
that's true.
So
Right.
that soft costs were a huge driver
Right,
of
absolutely.
that $10 million
Yeah,
figure
right,
on the
right,
bond
yeah.
vote. So
Millions of dollars.
what exactly, it was whatever we want to do for construction, we do have to build in
absolutely.
permitting and insurance and all of that other stuff. So I think,
Some of that too.
That was in the
Space.
1.5.
what's that?
I think they had some of it in the 1.5.
Probably, I'm sure they
from what I
did, because that was,
remember reading
that
it
was what.
years ago.
The new plan also, the Black
Clean-
River architectural firm also did too with construction estimates.
$74,000 for cleaning and and repointing the bricks.
The whole building.
Well, I just. I guess
This
it's a-
concrete stairs on
replace
the front
post
of the
office,
library,
high-back system,
65,000 if we want to replace those. We're
Really?
like, not now.
lightings.
What?
clean
Well,
renovation.
they have to, they're not, there's something about they're not to code and they're not level, they'd have to basically,
Aren't they new? Like within a
no,
decade?
in front of the library, the
Oh,
stairs
from
in
the
the front
library.
of the
I thought they
library.
meant the
no, no, no.
porticos. It's only
No,
10
no, no,
years
no,
old.
not the portico, no,
Nice.
library steps. So.
They're not
I
wood.
turned, they're more than that, because I turned 21 when we were doing that, so I can remember I was all excited. Yeah.
No, the masonry on the library steps.
That makes
like,
sense.
shockingly expensive.
Since we're getting close to the end here,
Yep.
can we
Yeah.
talk about agenda items? Because that's next on our
Yep.
list, isn't it?
Yes.
Agenda items for next time. But before we do that, I just want to go back and make sure I'm on the right page with what we are doing with those list of immediate maintenance things we'd like the select board to address. Are we just am I sending an email to Josh with it as the secretary of here saying this is what the committee is asking the select board to move forward with now, as these things won't change in the future? I mean, we're not gonna take apart the outside of the building, so
Yeah.
the brick is,
I think that makes
brick is
sense.
the
You just
brick.
say we have identified some maintenance deficiencies that need to be addressed. Whether we undertake or rehab or not, we recommend doing these before there's any more damage caused, and they can be done independently of other work interior of the building or et
if you
cetera.
guys are okay with it, I'll have a conversation with Josh first. Because maybe he wants to look at the pricing of that before he takes it to the select board, if he would be responsible for pricing. So I'll give him the one-on-one conversation
Yeah,
first and see
yeah.
what he's most comfortable with. And if he just thinks it has more strength for us to just send the email and please put this as an agenda item for the select board. However he wants to do it. Are we all okay with that?
Sounds
Okay,
perfect.
okay, cool. I'll do that. So, sorry, now back to our agenda items.
Should we do brief updates again on our things? So I'm gonna keep hammering on the energy stuff.
Let's do that. Let's do that. If it's not anything that impacts everything, I like to get into our stuff to get some stuff done and then
Yeah.
come back to the brief updates. If we
Yeah,
find
yeah.
that the update stuff is critical to what we're talking about, then it's always okay to add
Cool.
at that point. If that, is that okay with
So
everybody?
Not put it as an agenda. Sounds good.
Okay. I mean, no, put it as an agenda, but after we've got a couple things on, oh, by the way, and to update you on.
Down the bottom.
Because sometimes we get stuck in a conversation that is unnecessary.
Oh, really?
I'd like to to review the library capital plan. So if Amy gets it for an Excel and sends it to me, I can update the Excel for all of the town center. You know, change a couple things around, that kind of thing, add a couple things in. And I can pass that by both Josh and Duncan to see if they have anything else to add to that list.
Kind of review that.
Yeah, and I'm also gonna look at the bread loaf and see if there's anything on the bread loaves that should be on that capital maintenance plan. Like, maybe there's something not on the libraries, but there was something on the bread loaf that they were gonna do as a maintenance item, not as a brand new.
Yeah, look at
Building.
it. I don't remember seeing that, but it might be, take a look. Yeah.
So I'll look at, I'm trying to pull all the pieces as much as we can get together. So I think agenda item next time is that we could start with that capital plan.
Okay.
And then from the capital plan, I'd also like to revisit, we're gonna have maintenance needs a list from Duncan of other maintenance things that we might be able to take 3 more off that list and say, okay, select board, these 3 things should be addressed. Now, don't wait, because it's, the things that I'm seeing on that list are things that whatever we decide to do aren't impacted, or it's so low a cost, it should be addressed right now, even if the construction isn't gonna happen for 3 years.
Yep.
So we'll have Duncan's list to review of, we're calling that the current maintenance needs, or what is it? What do we call it in our agenda? I'm sorry.
Short-term
Is
maintenance,
it
well, we
short-term
called it
maintenance?
past and future building maintenance, but it might be short-term maintenance.
Okay,
items.
short-term maintenance items. Yes, that
Okay, so we're gonna have 3, just for everyone's clarity, we're gonna have 3 things. We're gonna have short-term maintenance, capital maintenance plan, and then we're gonna have capital improvements, which is like our bigger, whether we're gonna do a big project, what that looks like and all
Yep.
that. So those would be kind of like the 3 categories of stuff.
right. If it's beyond, if it's not part of a capital maintenance and it's something, doing something totally outside that, that's capital improvements. 100% agree. Yep. So I'll bring my laptop next time and we'll have spreadsheets going for each of
Let
the
me
3
write
different
this because
things,
it's your
or
agenda. I'll
3
just give
different
it to
tabs.
Duncan tonight and say, here,
Oh,
you
so we
can
have-
post
yeah.
our agenda for August.
So-
capital maintenance plan. And we need to just, that's gonna be the library morphed.
It's gonna be a spreadsheet.
suppose.
Yep. And then on that, I'm gonna take, on that spreadsheet, I'm gonna have tabs for each of those plans. We'll have the capital maintenance plan, we'll have the short-term maintenance, and we'll have another tab that'll be capital improvements.
You have excellent handwriting, and maybe that's just, maybe that's not. maybe
Handwriting looks
not-
beautiful
Not a
from
compliment
here.
as much as an indictment of my terrible handwriting.
But please have Duncan do the traditional setup of the
Yeah.
agenda, which is public comment, add deletions to the agenda, and ending with agenda for the next time.
Is there anything else? Are those 2 things gonna take up time, or do we wanna have?
Well, the-
allocate-
Oh, you were gonna do project, update.
Yeah, we do it brief.
prior-
updates.
Prior meeting agenda item updates.
And then do we want to allocate any time for rehashing, or not rehashing, it's, but for us to all keep developing our thoughts about where we're going with this bigger project, or are we?
Flood mitigation piece, I think we need to spend a whole meeting on.
Well,
And I-
probably more than that, once we're all done, but I think we do need to spend significant time going through and trying to understand exactly what's proposed, and is there anything in there that we feel we could push back on at all? I don't know if there is, but.
Sorry, can you, what do you mean,
He's talking about looking at the black.
What's
Oh,
that?
for the flood stuff, we can push?
Yeah,
back?
the
Oh,
flood
okay,
stuff, yeah.
yeah,
Or if it's something that our flood regulations is driving,
Yeah,
then
yeah,
we need to see what is the mitigation level, what's the benefit to keep it in and do it like that versus if we have a different suggestion.
the other thing,
I'll dig through, I gotta do that for homework. I'll dig through the bylaws for the floodplain regulations, 6.8 in the bylaws, and I'll revisit that.
So are we putting that on next agenda?
I think we have to skip it down one. I really think it's not gonna have enough time for
So it'll
next
be-
agenda, and it gives me more time to read up. I have the full FEMA Code 44 book if you want to read that.
no, no, yeah.
oh god,
But
I printed it out by mistake when I was doing our house, and it was like this thick, and I was like, I'm never gonna use this, and I still have it in a folder somewhere.
I have it with little sticky notes in different sections and highlighted areas.
I gotta give it to Bob Heiser, actually, because he's gonna
I called it the Bible, the little flood mitigation.
As I'm going through this, like I said, there's a lot of stuff in there. It's spread around and you find little nuggets here and there and whatever, try to put together in my head where a lot of this goes. Is there a need for us to talk to BlackRock? Should we ask the select board for some amount of money, not to do what they proposed as
Just to have,
to have them go back and give us a new plan, but to say, if we got questions about something or other.
how does that work? If we have like a 4-hour Q&A or something like that, or we can send them.
Something that we can say,
propose a huge-
I don't understand exactly what you're planning here as far as this flood mitigation. Could you
Have
not
Josh,
necessarily
I could
come
go-
and talk to us, but give us.
I
a
could go
written
either way on
answer?
that personally. I mean,
I want my questions ready to go. I'm not ready to ask to spend any money until we get, I don't know what the first question is that I'm gonna ask them.
I have a lot of questions that I'd like to ask them, but, and maybe we don't right now, but as I going through there's some of this I just don't understand. I can't pull together what that flood mitigation is that maybe all of us look through there and maybe somebody else finds stuff that I don't, and we can sit down and talk to it for an hour here and figure it all out. But if there is stuff that we just don't understand, I'd like to be able to go and say, what did you plan for this? And, give us a.
I do agree
email
with you on that
telling us
because
or
it
something
does
and
seem
get-
like I don't know if they're the right answer, but we have all these questions.
That's what
right
I
now.
fear, is that they're not.
We have all these questions, and whether it's them or someone else, we
Or
don't really
something
have anyone
else,
to
yeah.
ask right now. So like, I mean, luckily you're doing the flood stuff and you're gonna go research that, but I might dig into it specific to this
Mike
building.
and I, how about Mike, I'm willing to take in the sections and you bring out the sections and we revisit them and we pull up the floodplain regulations for
Well, we
Richmond.
can,
And we just get a better understanding.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, we can do that.
what's in the, I think you asked Josh, what's in the contract? Is there time already still left on the contract with them
I
to answer
My
questions?
understanding, no.
Can you just confirm that?
Yeah. I think that was kind of that's where we were at, was they kind of gave us a brief overview and that was the end of it. It sounds like.
They gave the brief overview that didn't include any details on the flood mitigation work.
Yeah. I mean, part of that might have been that we're just like hitting the ground and we didn't specifically ask those questions. So, I'm not saying that there wasn't answers there. I don't know.
You may have expertise enough that you can answer the questions if we get.
No,
into it.
that's
don't.
kind of what I'm running into, is that we have all these questions about specific things and we all ask each other them and we're all like, yeah, we do need to know that. I said, yeah.
I'd like to know, they talked about putting on some liquid sealant on the, are they gonna dig down to the base of the foundation to do that? Or are they gonna just do it above ground? Those kind of things. I don't know what they had proposed to do there and what's needed. I guess they do have water leaking in through the walls in some ways that gets the floor wet down there when it floods. So can they fix that? I don't know, but.
Yeah.
My question is, the designs that they did were architectural. They weren't engineering.
I think
Was
they
the
were-
level,
I think they were
They were conceptual.
conceptual
designs.
design. They weren't,
Okay.
they
To
weren't
be
even.
able to turn the project over to a cost estimator who could say, okay, if this is the ballpark of what you're wanting to
Okay.
do, if this is sort of the square footage that you want, the tenants that you have to accommodate somewhere, we could make it kind of look like this just to calculate cost per square footage and cost for things. They were conceptual designs, not construction designs.
correct,
There
so,
was some engineering studies that were done, because there were several different engineers who came in and walked through the building and
Yeah.
met with people and did, site work. There was some civil engineering, I think some
there's a-
structural engineering people who came in and worked with them to do different reports.
There's a report from Du Bois and King, which I think they're a major construction contractor. And there's also one here from Engineering Ventures, which I believe is a civil engineering.
I think Du Bois and King does mechanical engineering. Du Bois and King construction company bought.
They did a lot of.
They own an engineering firm now too,
Yeah.
so they do contract engineering. So
And then John and Andrew, the project manager from the architectural firm with our, and John Himmelgarn, who's the head of that firm, they came to many of our meetings and sort of talked us through different things that they were, and asked us, what do you want us to do about this? So they were good. They were always good at answering questions.
And it may be that a lot of the questions that I have were answered in those meetings, but aren't in the reports that I can get the answers to easily. I
It's possible.
suspect that's the case, but.
They're helpful to.
I guess I'd want to make sure, here's the difference for me. If the architecture group is coming to explain what the engineer told them, I'd rather pay the engineer to come tell me.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
If you want engineering answers, you gotta ask the engineers. You can't be, well, we didn't do that work, we hired it out, let me get back to you. That's gonna do me no good.
On the other hand, there's stuff in here in this engineering report that this is a report to them. And it said, let's talk about what to do. So I think, I'm not sure that what
Is in the
this
report
document
is what
was
is on the
what
plan.
actually got
Gotcha.
passed through to the actual proposal. Maybe it did. I assume most of it did, but we just.
So if it's for cost estimations, there's gotta be. I don't know, it just feels like there's not a clear plan and description about what the flood-proof mitigation work was.
Yeah, I agree. And I there might be because it was so complex and stuff, but if it's that complex,
You're
it needs a
giving
good
him,
plan.
okay,
If
good
we
for
had-
you for trying to sound good, but I call on that.
If we had,
Yeah.
if we
Trying
had
to get-
passed the bond vote back in March, what would the next step have been as far as getting this ready to build?
Going out to cost, get the cost, the true
I
cost.
mean, I think,
Well,
Well, you would have first had.
somebody's gotta make the engine,
yeah, we would have gone through and
Construction drawings.
compiled construction docs, and then we would have
so
and we
would
would've
the,
done a bid
Would
process.
have made them,
Black River.
Black River would have made.
We wish it was
a set of
BlackRock.
Black something rock.
Blackwater.
That's when we would have started to have the conversations of, all right, are we designing for a police department? Like, what is this
Right.
space going to actually,
Yeah.
look like, where's the wall gonna be?
So-
Who's going in this space? What is this?
This sounds like a very large piece of it there, which was that
Yeah.
included in the, where was that buried into that quote we
I
had?
think that was the general
was-
conditions of
Yeah.
the architectural design and construction
Okay.
fees was
I-
that next section of actually coming up with
I think it was,
readable drawings.
yeah, I think it was just big chunks of money in that, that said, build at $3-4 million or something, I mean, it was
Yeah.
probably buried in there, but.
The $1.2 million for flood mitigation and roof work did not ever tell us what the true flood mitigation cost was. That was my point from day one.
No, there were a lot of.
Give me what the flood mitigation cost was. If that's the number one question we go back to them with and get an answer for, that's what I want to know.
Yeah.
That's the only, out of
And-
1.2 million, was it
Not even
200,000
for
for
the
flood
number, but
mitigation?
This is why I keep going back in my head, not like saying we should do this, but I keep going back to that. I don't understand how we would accurately do this project in the order, with the order of events that we were required to as a town, without it being a design build project. So we would have, so the bond vote passed, we got the money, we go complete construction documents, we put it out to bid. And the
do
estimating is
that.
not right. And it's wrong.
And it's nobody's fault. Nobody's accountable.
What the fuck, what the heck do we do? And I know, and it's not, and I understand why. And I'm not blaming anyone, because this is what I do for a living, and I understand that constraint.
Yeah.
But a lot of times when you do that, you are doing that with a company or a couple or a family or a person or whatever. So you can say, hey, we designed this, your architect designed this, you gave it to me, here's a price. And they're like, well, I thought this was a $600,000 house. Why is this a $1.8 million house?
Yeah.
And you can say, yeah, I don't,
Because they don't build.
they didn't build it. like-
Kind of that's what happened here.
But even if it's 20% off, so it's like, okay, we wanted to spend 800 and this is 960. The three of us can sit down and hash it out, and they
Yeah.
can say, I'm willing, they can do the math in their head and all that. We can't.
Yeah.
We have 9.41 million that was passed in a bond vote. And if we don't come in under that, we don't do the project.
Yeah, right.
So it's like, I don't know how we would, short of just saying, we think it's gonna be a $5 million project. we want 7.5 million
just in case.
approval just in case. I don't know how we would.
And it will
Do it.
find a way to spend that 7.5
Exactly.
when we.
Exactly. And it's not, and that's not a critique of the previous
Yeah,
committee or the architect or anything. It's just with the constraints of doing it through a public bond vote.
well, I think.
It's beyond me to rank that.
I don't understand how we can have paid this company the kind of money we've paid them, and we can't have the basic questions answered, such as, how much did you estimate in there for flood proofing, and what did that entail?
And I mean, we know how much.
That's a basic
We know how
question.
much they estimated, right?
Basic.
There's a number for it, isn't there?
Well, they threw it in.
No,
with
they
this
put it in with the
stuff,
roof.
Problem.
Yes, but so they obviously, they put a number on it. They didn't, I can't imagine that they just
And
said
it's
1
probably
million.
buried in these
But there's,
spreadsheets.
so there was some assumption in there. And that's where it is frustrating that we don't have that information. But they do, somewhere they know, and if they did say just 1 million, they could say, yeah, we didn't really know, it's 1 million, which is like, no, it's not good. But someone put thought into that.
Yeah.
I have a really hard time believing that they would do that. knowing
I'm
were
saying
gonna
they
scrutinize.
didn't. I'm not saying they didn't,
Yeah,
but you
no,
don't combine apples and oranges and say, these are from the apple trees.
I mean, they do make trees now where it's like pears and apples all grow in the same tree.
Right, but oranges don't go with apples, not the last I checked.
Pears, figs, yeah.
That's called the.
Yeah, so do we like, is it worth pursuing that to get all these answers, or are we beyond that where we are so far?
Maybe
where
we ought to think
we've-
about what the questions are.
That's where I was at. I don't wanna go to a
And-
question.
And
I guess,
come up with a list of questions and then say, can we get,
do we think that a lot, we are gonna get enough information from? Even if they answered every question we could have about the previous proposal, is that, obviously the flood stuff's very useful, because the flood stuff's not gonna change. If we have to do it, we have to do it. It's not, hey, we have to do
Yeah.
75% of it or whatever. If we trigger a substantial improvement, we have to flood proof it. There's probably some different ways to do it. Somewhat, but it's not like, hey, we can
I
just.
think there's, like Jeff had said in public meetings or in public before, that there's loopholes, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about the substantial improvement triggering the flood mitigation. I think we should look at flood mitigation. If we're looking at capital improvements to this structure, it has to be on our list. The
Yeah.
level of what we're doing is to be determined, is where I'm at.
I guess my point is just that we're not gonna, it doesn't seem like that's not something we can scale back. The flood mitigation is kind of there's a right way to do it, and there's different ways to do it, but there's right ways and wrong ways to do it. It's not like the interior renovation where we can say, we're gonna rehab it as it sits versus we're gonna change all the walls around.
pull out all
The
the
flood,
walls
the
and
flood
then
stuff
put it
should stay roughly
Yeah.
similar.
Yeah.
If we decide to do it, no matter what, within reason. And so that's there should be some value in knowing what those assumptions are. And if they have detailed assumptions in there and all that, there is decent amount of value in us knowing that. I just don't.
I do agree, but I think, let's just say Josh sends an email with the list of our questions. I don't need somebody to come present.
Yeah.
If you can't answer the questions in writing back to us, then I'm gonna question anything that you're providing to me. This list of questions, and it says it takes them an hour to look through their information and put it back. An hour worth of somebody's time at $200 an hour, or however many bucks an hour, that's on Josh's ability to spend. We don't have to go to the select board to ask to set aside
Yeah.
$7,000 like that was before.
Yes,
So
so
that's where I'm at, is when we get our list of questions, if we think, if this data dump that they gave us was all of their information, and we've got 10 questions that could you answer this? And they can't do that for a reasonable amount of money that Josh can approve under
Mhm.
building maintenance, I don't care what it is. I don't want to talk to them anyhow. That's where I'm at. If they can't answer questions in an hour.
Yeah.
What did they really
And I
need?
guess some of the questions I have to ask them, because I know they put a lot of thought into the interconnectedness of all this stuff, and I have a lot of questions that are not like sentence long answers, just like what they're. I have like a ton of questions about how the HVAC was proposed and all that, and what assumptions are made there, and kind of why they were made,
Yeah.
not by the committee, because I've talked to a few people about that, but like by them for the necessity and sizing and locating and all that. And so,
I don't have the same questions, and I'll tell you why, because I think a lot of it was driven by what Jeff wanted.
Yeah.
And the heat exchange pumps and all of that kind of stuff. I'm not there. I don't
Sure.
need to, I don't feel, I want to know, I want about
or
the
just like
flood proofing.
sizing and stuff, and because I know there's envelope improvements and all that, and like how those interconnect, whether what the actual heat source is and stuff. I don't have any real, like, I agree. For the windows too, like what we're running into for like actually physically replacing them, like they did estimate that they cost more. Did they catch something that, I mean, this is an easy question, like, did they catch something we don't notice? Or was that a projection based on
I
market?
think that's a basic question.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a long drawn out. I mean, analyzing the HVAC system, I don't agree necessarily with what was proposed and designed, period. That's a system I'd be willing to spend money to really have us think about. And I mean, it's one thing if you're
Yeah.
gonna drop all the walls and you're gonna redo everything inside a whole remodel, then doing a whole new system is one thing. If we're talking about what do we have and what's going to be the best thing for us to move forward with after doing an energy audit and with different windows and all that kind of stuff, it's going to change the whole design. So I'm willing to spend money on a new design that makes sense to all of
And
us.
then work with an engineer and.
Correct.
Okay.
And not go back to what they proposed of
Yeah.
what somebody else's vision and dream was. I just want to know about the flood proofing. I think that's the place where we have to start with, is the bottom of the building. Can we keep people down there or not? Because that's
Yeah,
gonna
that's really-
determine
that's
if we
really
have to
critical.
find room for them somewhere else.
I do think we should probably wrap up. It is
Yeah.
8:47.
One,
Go ahead, Mike.
yeah, just as far as, well, starting with the flood proofing, even if we end up saying, yeah, we gotta do what they proposed is what has to happen. I wanna understand what it is, and I wanna understand why it is well enough that I could explain it to the guy in the park that Buttonholes being wants to know why we need to do this. And I think we need to, I've been kind of harping on this from the beginning, that I think we need to start pumping some of that out to the public when we have something that
When
we
we know.
can, to say, we've decided that this is what needs to be done for, like, you know, I've thought even now possibly putting something out on Front Porch Forum or something, just saying, we're a new committee here, we're mostly new members, we're looking at it, we're trying to, you know, without getting into anything specific, and also say, you know, if anybody'd like to come and sit in the seats at our meeting, we have 2 open places on our committee, anybody want to jump in and help, you know. I think it might not be a bad thing to just put out an initial introduction kind of thing. And then once we've made some decisions about where we're going, try to, in small doses, start dumping it out, because we're gonna have to sell this to somebody when we ask for money, and I think keeping them involved, and even if we're gonna get some, if we get some blowback, great. I mean, you know, I told you the guy that in the park that thought we had to tear down the post office. He also says we didn't need a new heating system, we just moved the natural gas one up high and so forth.
On Mike's,
So we don't want to answer everyone, we don't want to get tied up answering all of those, but we'd like to get a feel for what the public's thinking, so we can kind of in general answer them. And I just like to get the
On-
public involved.
on that note, I think I just looked at calendars going forward. Our next meeting, if we have them on 2 weeks from now and 2 weeks from that, our next meeting is August 7th. We've got the agenda.
We got we're actually the
I think we're
14th.
the 14th.
Because we're the second and fourth Wednesday.
Okay, second and fourth. Okay,
This
so
is a 5-week.
for like the 14th and the 28th or something like
Yep,
that?
yep.
Okay, so the 14th and 28th. So the 14th meeting, we got the agenda done for.
Mhm.
The 28th meeting, if we start talking flood mitigation, and if we can find out from Josh, if we're allowed to create the questions, if you and I can talk a little bit about what you've been seeing, and I look at the floodplain regulations, we get our mind around the right questions to ask them. We're developing questions for them by the 28th. I think we can go to the public by the second meeting in September and be educating the public on the flood mitigation needs that we have after all this flooding. It'd be perfect timing.
Yep.
It'd still be fresh in
Yep.
everybody's mind.
I think maybe we ought to add an agenda item, an ongoing agenda item at the end of each meeting, just say, is there anything we want to?
Any shout out to the public.
Anything we want to let the public know at this point? Yes, no,
Just
whatever.
like a public update.
Yeah. I
potential
mean, we
public
don't have to
update or
do it
whatever.
every meeting, but we
Press
gotta
release.
just think about, is there anything?
Seems very formal. Um, Yeah, I think that's worthwhile. Yeah.
So I don't have anything to add to educate the public on from this
I don't
meeting.
either.
Do we want to craft an intro? Like just say, explain that we're a new committee.
I'd be glad to
You wanna
do
do
that. I'm leaving town tomorrow for a few days, so it'll be the first of the week before I get back, but
Will you have it ready for the next meeting?
I can do that.
Let's
Yeah.
let's not post stuff
Yeah.
from the committee unless the
Yeah,
committee's
well,
all
that
seen
was
it.
a good question, and I also thought, is that a legal thing to do with the open meeting laws and so forth? I don't see a problem
Yeah, I think that's
posting
legal.
it. We don't want to get into discussions.
Oh, no, so it's a
Yeah.
very brief thing about like new committee. We want to invite anybody who
Yeah,
wants to
yeah.
come on, a very basic thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
We
all
can
right.
all proof that. I think if anybody wants to, if you wanted to do it as an individual, I'm a member of this committee and I'd
Yeah.
like y'all to, if there's anybody who wants to participate, that's a basic invite versus the
Right.
committee's
Yeah,
been,
that
this
was
is what
kind
we're
of my
working
question.
on.
I can do it as Mike Storrs as a member of this committee, and this is what I'm doing, or I can do it as a output from the committee, and I mean, I guess,
I think if you
If
want
I-
to do an intro that's just like broadly saying we're looking at the building, we're looking at all aspects
Yeah.
of the maintenance and
all right,
proposed
I'll-
uses of the
I'll-
building, and feel free to join us and all that.
Yeah.
I'd fear that we're
That's true.
looking for public input versus somebody to come on the committee and participate.
Yeah.
I think the first task is to invite people to be on the committee.
well, I
Or
think,
both. I
I
think
don't see
both.
why you can't do both.
Invite both.
I'm not organized enough to take public input, though. I want to get those lists, those spreadsheets, and understand some of the stuff on the list and then start to
Well, I
say,
would-
Well, I
Or
think
clarify that
putting
the
anything
time for
out
public
on
input is to
Board
come to the
Forum,
meeting.
you're inviting public input.
"Oh, yeah, I like how she said it. I like how she
I
said it.
think, Mike, what you might want to say is, we welcome people to
Yeah.
join the committee.
Yeah.
If you would like to give the committee input, we have public comment at the beginning of
Right,
every
yeah, that
meeting.
would be
That's
fine.
the time
That's
for
fine.
input or
Or-
questions or
Feel free to
questions.
provide.
We can't answer
100%.
questions over front porch
But I mean,
forum,
when you
but
start to go into
Yeah.
the details of what we're looking at,
No, I think
that's where the
that's-
public
that-
input comes back out on front porch forum where you
Right.
don't want it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Or if people even want to provide us written public
Yeah.
input that we can
Yeah.
review as a
Yes.
committee in a meeting,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
fine too,
Yeah.
if they can't attend, but.
Yeah.
So all I'm saying is, how about can you draft something and I'm okay with you proofing it and releasing it on behalf of me? I'm
Sounds great.
good with that.
Okay.
I don't need to have it at another meeting, but it just, somebody else's input tends to make sure we're getting the
So,
message.
so if I draft it and just send it to you,
Yep.
Just
then
her.
that's legal as long as we don't get.
Correct.
yeah, we're not discussing it. We're not
Yeah, just
discussing
keep-
Well,
it.
you
Yeah.
two, you
Yeah.
two can discuss it and work it out without us.
Great.
We've granted permission for
Yeah,
you to
I'm
do it.
gonna, I'm gonna wrap up. I got ahead because I forgot to turn the water back on in my house.
Oh my God, we're good. This is,
At least texted me right in the beginning of the meeting, so it's been a while.
I feel we have been,
Do we need a
Everybody,
motion to adjourn or
well, yeah, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
all those in favor?
I.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.